What if the most powerful move you can make at work is writing something down, not a formal complaint, not a lawsuit, just a simple dated record? That's what happened to Nicole Harris, an employee who reported harassment. And even though she already quit, that documentation still got her manager fired. By the end of this video, you will understand why documentation is still valuable even after you've left a job. Also, what types of employee complaints HR legally can't ignore, even if they're informal, undocumented, or come after someone resigns, and how courts evaluate whether HR should have known about misconduct, and what happens if they fail to act. Hi, I'm Harlow Reed, employment lawyer, HR consultant, and creator of the HR Insider. On this channel, I do more than give my legal opinion. I talk about real legal cases that demonstrate how the law might apply to your circumstances. If you've seen any of the other videos from this channel, you know that I talk a lot about the importance of documentation and just how powerful it can be, because documentation protects you if you ever decide to take legal action, but it also helps others too. When multiple people documenting similar experiences, it validates those concerns and pushes for change that benefits everyone. And it also helps you stay grounded and see things more clearly in the moment. And there are so many reasons why documentation matters, and we'll get into those another day. But today, we are looking at a real life case that proves just how important documentation can be even after you've already left the job. Let's talk about it. The content shared on this channel is for informational purposes only and is not a substitute for professional legal advice. Always consult a qualified attorney or HR professional for specific guidance tailored to your needs. And don't forget to like and subscribe. This case begins with Nicole Harris, who worked as a sales associate for Fossil at one of its high-end stores in Frisco, Texas. Harris was hired as a seasonal sales associate in November of 2018, and just a couple of months later, in January of 2019, she was promoted to a regular position, and she continued working in that role until she resigned in early May 2019. During Harris's time at Fossil, the stores were managed by Carrie Zabrowicz and another employee named Leland Brown, who served as the assistant store manager. Shortly after Nicole started working at Fossil, Leland Brown started communicating with her on social media. Leland Brown discovered Nicole Harris's public profile, which she used to promote her modeling career, and he began sending her messages. But on December 3rd, 2018, he crossed the line because he sent Harris sexually explicit messages and very obscene videos of himself. Afterwards, Harris blocked him immediately, but later, at his request, she unblocked him, and his behavior unfortunately continued. Between December 2018 and April 2019, Leland Brown regularly commented on Nicole Harris's appearance. He used emojis on her modeling photos. He engaged in unwanted physical contact at work. Harris said he would brush up against her, take photos of her from behind, and even follow her to her car. Hey, are you still watching? If you find this video helpful, please take a moment to like and subscribe. Your support really helps. Thanks. And by mid April 2019, Harris had enough, so she blocked him again and the messages stopped. Nicole Harris didn't report the harassment to a manager during her employment. She did, however, confide in two other seasonal sales associates, and she later explained that she didn't feel comfortable reporting Leland Brown to someone who held authority over him. Meanwhile, Leland Brown was also harassing another sales associate identified as KK through social media. KK shared her discomfort with a third employee with limited supervisory duties. That third employee, she brought the concern to the store manager, Carrie Zabrowicz. I'm going to call her Carrie Z going forward. And she brought that concern to Carrie Z at the end of April. So Carrie Z asked for KK to speak with her directly, which eventually happened in early May. Now, at the same time that all of this was happening, Nicole Harris was growing frustrated with her work schedule. She was juggling two retail jobs, babysitting, and college courses, and she wanted to switch to morning shifts to avoid working with Leland Brown. But Harris didn't share any of this with management, and she was also not aware that weekday morning shifts were not available to sales associates. And by April, Harris worked only 4 shifts at Fossil on the 3rd, 6th, 19th, and 28th. And on May 2nd, she emailed her resignation to store leadership, and this is what she put in her letter of resignation, which turned out to be an important statement in terms of the validity of her harassment claim. She wrote, "I'm having trouble with my schedule and my job's putting everything together. I'm very sorry to have to do this, but I have to make Saturday, May 4th, my last day with the team. I'm getting overexhausted and putting a lot of stress on myself trying to juggle 3 jobs and finish school to graduate." Harris worked 2 final shifts on May 3rd and 4th and left Fossil. But things didn't end there. After she resigned, Harris spoke with KK. Remember KK? She is the other employee who also had complained about Leland Brown's behavior. Then on May 8th, the same employee who had previously reported KK's complaint reached out to Carrie Z again. This time, she shared what she'd learned about Nicole Harris, revealing that not only had KK been harassed, but Nicole Harris might have been as well. Carrie Z immediately contacted Harris, who confirmed the details, including sexually explicit messages. The next day, she met with both women and escalated the report to Human Resources. An investigation followed, and Leland Brown was terminated later that month. Harris later filed a lawsuit against Fossil, claiming a hostile work environment. She alleged that she tried to report the harassment through Fossil's anonymous reporting system in late April, but no one responded. I always find it revealing to examine how employers respond to discrimination claims. Their response can tell us a lot about their priorities, their legal strategies, and what types of defenses employees face when they raise these types of claims. So let's take a closer look at how Fossil chose to defend itself in the lawsuits. One thing that's important to understand when it comes to how employers defend themselves against harassment claims is what their legal obligations actually are once an employee reports harassment. If you want to take a closer look at the steps employers are required to take, be sure to check out my video, Workplace Harassment Prevention Training. I'll link it for you in the description below. The first thing Fossil did was file a motion to dismiss, and that's very common. That's usually a very traditional response from an employer who's facing a discrimination claim. And one of their main arguments regarding why the case needed to be dismissed was because there wasn't any proof that the company knew, that Fossil knew about the harassment, which means they couldn't have failed to act because there was no information for them to know that this was happening. In fact, Fossil said the undisputed facts show the exact opposite, that they acted quickly to address the issue once it was brought to their attention. And they pointed to 3 key pieces of evidence. They said that their anonymous reporting system didn't show any complaints tied to the Frisco store while Harris was working there. They also said that the company didn't learn about Brown's misconduct until after Nicole Harris had already resigned. And the third fact they offered in defense of Harris's claim was that Fossil became aware of the harassment, and when they did, they promptly reached out to Harris and took immediate action by terminating Leland Brown's employment. And the trial court agreed with Fossil and they granted them their motion for summary judgment or dismissal. And then Harris appealed. And on her appeal, Harris essentially repeated the claims she raised at trial. She maintained that Fossil knew or should have known about the harassment and failed to act while she was employed. And the Court of Appeals agreed with Harris. They overturned the trial court's decision, which had originally sided with Fossil. The appellate court found that Harris's testimony about the emails she said she sent was enough to raise a factual dispute, indicating that Fossil might have known, or at least should have known, about Leland Brown's misconduct and what Harris and others were experiencing due to Leland Brown's behavior. The appellate court went a step further, stating that Fossil failed to take meaningful action after Harris sent the anonymous email. An email she testified in court was the method she used during her employment to report the harassment. And what did Fossil do in response to the appellate court's decision? You guessed it. Fossil appealed to the Texas Supreme Court. The Texas Supreme Court said even if they assumed that Fossil received Harris's anonymous complaint in April, there was only a brief window of time between when Fossil became aware of the issue and when they conducted an investigation. So the court emphasized that employers are allowed some time to assess a complaint to determine the best course of action and whether or not that complaint is credible and how severe it is before they take action. And in this case, Harris only worked 4 shifts in April, and there was no evidence she experienced any harassment during those shifts. So, according to the Texas Supreme Court, Fossil had no obligation to take immediate action. And when it comes to constructive knowledge, meaning Fossil should have known about the harassment because it was obvious, well, that argument didn't hold up in court either. The Texas Supreme Court explained that for that standard to apply to an employer, the harassment would need to be so open and widespread that the company could have seen it simply by opening its corporate eyes. But most of the conduct in this case took place through private social media, not in front of other employees, meaning Fossil had no way of knowing unless someone told them. The court didn't dwell on whether Harris reported the harassment. Instead, they focused on what Fossil did once they found out about the harassment. And in their view, Fossil acted quickly and appropriately. In its ruling, the Texas Supreme Court acknowledged the seriousness of the situation, writing, "Our holding today does not minimize the seriousness of Brown's misconduct in sending unwanted, sexually explicit social media content or any anguish that Harris may have suffered." The court said that Brown's harassing conduct was reprehensible, but Harris failed to provide the evidence that was necessary to hold her employer, Fossil, liable. In other words, documentation matters, but the details, timing, and how the employer responds to that documentation also shapes whether it holds up in court. If you're wondering what the Texas Supreme Court means when they talk about open and widespread harassment, I actually cover that in another video called The Sexual Harassment Case That Changed Everything. It's a firsthand story that really shows what courts are looking for when they decide if harassment is serious enough to hold an employer responsible. You'll find the link down in the description if you want to check it out. But what's powerful and what is important is that the manager was fired because of Nicole's documentation, even though it came after she resigned. But in the eyes of the court, that documentation was too late to hold the company legally responsible. The court ruled that because Nicole didn't give the company a chance to investigate while she was still employed, and because she didn't mention harassment in her resignation letter, the company wasn't liable for the harassment she experienced. The complaint mattered, but the timing and consistency, that mattered even more. The system isn't perfect, but what you put in writing becomes a part of the story. So it's important to document things. In Nicole's case, her documentation helped get a harasser removed from the company. But because she didn't say enough, she didn't notify anyone at the right time, she didn't get the legal outcome she hoped for. So let this be your reminder. Document what happened, speak the truth clearly, and don't wait until after you leave to put it in writing. Thanks for watching today. I'll see you in the next video.